Our second clergy member this afternoon is Pastor John Wallace of the Church of the Savior in Westerville, who has recently begun spending time and energy in building the Central Ohio Worker Center. Now, Pastor Wallace and I met at a meeting hosted by the Ohio Council of Churches to discuss ways in which we could further activities of the National Institute for Civil Discourse, which we'll be hearing more about this afternoon by Michaela. I had expressed how I would be open and pleased to attend churches to meet congregants who may not be very familiar with who Muslims are and who may not have many, if any, personal relationships with Muslims. Long story short, Pastor Wallace organized an event at the Church of the Savior for me to meet members of the church, answer questions, and simply get to know one another. I left the church that afternoon feeling grateful and inspired. So please welcome Pastor Wallace to speak about his experience in hosting this gathering.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. It's great to see this great conference, this symposium, and great to be part of it and part of your tradition you have going here. Colleen has set things up well. She explained all the points of all of this. My talk can be simple, but I'm going to make it a little more complex because it's a simple model. Talk. You know, the Fazil is a good person to do that. And in this congregation, what made sense is they were not people on buying into this already. They were people who had their doubts, who did not know Muslims, and so it was not just preaching to the choir of people who are already open. It was people who need to be opened up, and so Fazil helped to do that. But let me say a few things that set up how it happened and my background that guided me toward this. My interest in civil discourse includes interfaith conversation. So I've had that, a lot of my life. I grew up in the 60s when we were having our disputes about Vietnam and how did we need to learn to talk to each other. And so that we've had conflict before in our society. And so one of my first things toward interfaith things in Columbus was part of forming Interfaith Communities Uniting for Peace. Some of you may have gone to our events opposing the Iraq War. So that was a group that came together at that time and proved to be pretty much on the right track about the issues of that, but it was interfaith, and so people working together. And for me, too, I've worked on a German philosopher named Jürgen Habermas, who talks about the force of the unforced agreement. To think about how do we come to agreements that not imposing on each other, but working together. And his main thing is the goal of communication is to reach an understanding. And that's something that I think really is true because it's true for those who want to lie. Because you only get away with a lie because the other person thinks you're trying to reach an understanding. That's the whole point. But the liar knows that trying to reach an understanding is the point. And so that's a basis for what we are. And Habermas talked about something called the ideal speech situation. Not something that we could ever reach, but the way to critique what's going on and to say, are the people at the table that need to be there? Are we inclusive of other religions? Are we inclusive of men and women? Are we inclusive of the poor? Are people getting their voices heard? And so all of this are the things that kind of undergird all we've been talking about today and all the others have talked about as well, the good foundation we had this morning. And so all of this is a foundation for participatory democracy also, and to know how it matters for our whole culture and our whole world to work on these things, and so that we need to find ways to do that. And so the Ohio Council of Churches, Rebecca Tollefson, had a group together on civil discourse. And so all of that led me to want to be there, that that's the kind of thing that we need to do. And all of my background led me to want to be there. There's other folks from that group that are here today, too. And so I found my notes. I was trying to figure out how this came about. March 16th, 2017, we had a meeting that Fazil was at. He came to join us in our discussion. And so we talked about how we could get Muslims and Christians together. And our group has done a lot of talk, and we haven't always figured out how to put things into action. And so it just struck me that day, come to my church and let's talk. And I've retired from there now, so I couldn't interview them for today. But I said that they're people that I think we could get some people together They need to hear this, and I think they would come out. They would not be people who already, you know, are receptive, but they would be open, I think. And so we got it scheduled. And so, you know, it was Ask a Muslim. You know, I think what I said, Meet a Muslim, I think that's what he said, he had mentioned. And put out a little thing to sign up for these people to do. And so, I mean, part of what I thought, you know, I was a pastor that had a relationship with them. I wasn't totally in flow with them. They were much more conservative generally, and I was on the progressive side. So it isn't always easy for me to convey these things because they're not always ready to hear that, what I would want to say. But this seemed like an experience that they could have. It wasn't me telling them how to think or anything, but it's allowing them to have an experience. And so that's what we wanted to do. And so we came together for that, and it was an important day. And this congregation, it's in Westerville, but it's east of the reservoir. It doesn't look like Westerville, so it's east of Hoover Dam and all of that, out there at Harlem Road and Fancher. And it looks kind of rural out there, and so it's out of the way. And so it's people that are not in the flow of all of these kind of conversations. And so not any of them had known Muslims. And one guy I tried to get to come, he couldn't do it, but he has a daughter married a Muslim guy. Our grandson converted, and he doesn't understand this. And so I really wanted him to come. So he had some contact, but he didn't understand what was going on. So, but he did not come. But other people had never met a Muslim, you know, or that they knew of. I mean, imagine people run into each other, right? You don't always identify the other person's religion. But this was just a chance to talk together is what I told them. And so that we had about a dozen people come out on a Sunday afternoon. Fazil came out, and we just had a conversation. I think I had some questions ready in case we needed them, but they had questions. You know, and so that was good. It was just good dialogue for them to see someone who spoke a language they understood, you know, in ways that he could convey to them what was going on, to experience that for them. And so he answered their questions. You know, no question was out of bounds. We were clear about that. And so one woman was there who I knew could say some wild stuff. And then she got her question. I wanted her to ask her question. You know, that's what we were there for. And so she asked him about Sharia law. You know, and the Sharia law is the thing that is promulgated to scare all kinds of people. And he was able to dispel her fears about it, you know, that it was within the Muslim community, really, that it focuses. They're not imposing it on the world. And so that woman went away. The key to the conversation is that woman went away happy that she came. When I thought she could come there and she could just stir it up, she could go away mad that we did it. And the only negative of the whole time was one of our 90-year-old members was really worried about a Muslim person being in our sanctuary. And so, you know, it was kind of, how do you know, and I knew her when I was a kid in Michigan, and so she's my mother's age, and so how do you convey to someone like this that this is not a threat to her, you know? And so it was interesting to convey that, and she survived it, and she did not come to the conversation, but she went along with us doing that. And so that's, you know, kind of the story is how do we make this more normal? You know, how do we make this as something that people can do? And so that's what I encourage you to. In our case, it was just a simple conversation. No great plan, no great work ahead of time. It's just inviting people to come and talk. And so I encourage you to think of the opportunities you have to set something like that up and to know that that will be a simple way that we can all move ahead in a way that promotes love and peace and the civil discourse that can, you know, revive our nation and revive our world. And I think people of faith, we have an important role to play to get people to talk to each other and not think that we just need to be in name calling. So I'm grateful that you're here and grateful for the work that we're all in together.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, John. You know, and what John didn't mention is really why I think really made this meeting a success is how John was able to make the participants feel safe and comfortable, and that was really key.